Hi, hello. It is another episode of Art Critiques from the Art Crit subreddit on Reddit. So this person says, what can I do to improve? I have lots of notes on things, and I made it a little brighter and with a little bit more contrast so that I can read your notes because they're in that light blue that's meant to be like erased later. So, this brings up the question, and something that I know a lot of young artists run into. Usually at this point, a teacher will say, stop drawing anime, you need to practice realism. Sort of. Okay, so when you are practicing, when you are learning the proportions of the face, I recommend using a realistic head model and learning the proportions that way. You have to learn the rules to break the rules. Anime becomes a crutch because then we're trying to draw a stylized eye, but we don't know what a real functional eye looks like. So let's read some of your notes. Face is longer than expected. Change posture while drawing. Absolutely. If you are drawing on a sketchbook that is about the size of printer paper, it's possible that when it's down flat that you're going to see things there. When you hold it up straight, it's going to be a different proportion than you originally thought it was. Another thing we can do, I'm just going to keep the blue theme going. Another thing we can do is we want to use facial features in order to find the proportions of the face, which you want to start with realism and then study anime and see how those rules change. They should be a side-by-side, in my opinion, study, not just a singular study. So we have the center of the face coming through here. This is our chin, our nose, the top of our nose, and our hairline. So you're doing pretty good. You have your nose length here, which also goes up a nose length here, which is where your hairline is, and down to where the chin is. And then you have this side part where the hair is. What happens when we have a side part is rather than going straight back like you have it, the side part usually follows the curvature of the head. So there's the curvature of our head. I agree. After the hairline, it does go up a little too far. I would bring the size of the skull at the top down just a little. So if we're doing an anime noses tend to be smaller. So that's probably why it feels like it's a little too long, because the anime face squishes a little bit. And then from your eyebrows, which should go about here, then you would have your ear. So that's why your ear feels a little too big. Now, one of the things when I talk about function, so the eye is a sphere, and which means that it is round and three-dimensional, and the eyelids go around that sphere and show its three-dimensionality. So if I draw a circle, it's a flat circle. But if I draw a line going over it, I have now created the slight illusion of a sphere. And if I draw a line down here, I'm also going on to continue that illusion that it is round. I can also add shading to it to give more illusion that it is three-dimensional on a two-dimensional plane, which is why we draw and why we add shading. So with the eyes, let's see what notes we have. We have the hairline. Hairline starts at a weird angle. Lower, smaller, change perspective. Yes. No, I would not say the ear is a good size. It's a good size compared to where the eyebrows and the nose are, but because you have larger eyes, that distorts the size of the ear. So I would say the ear should be about this size. And then we have the little thing that comes in front. I highly recommend studying from real life because then you know the parts of the ear, so when you simplify it into anime, you understand what an ear does. So here's one of the issues I think you're running into with the eyes is this line is fairly straight. So what we want is we want a curve because our eyes curve. This creates more of an illusion that his eye is spherical and therefore functional, rather than having straight lines. And then the iris and the pupil. And then when we're in three-quarters view, we're going to keep the nose there. So here we're having a more rounded eye. I'm not too worried about getting the eyebrows spot on. So we have, the eye is a sphere, and we now have eyelashes that curve around the eye that defines the form. Even though we're in a stylized genre of drawing, we have still created that illusion. And then of course you have the inner corner, which when you're drawing about this size, I would say don't worry too much about that inner corner. So when we rotate the eye, so right, we have a sphere here, we have a sphere here. However, we are now at an angle. So the eye is going to appear a little shorter than the other eye, and that curve gets compressed. This is what the other eye, the struggle is all about, is getting that curvature better. I'm going to have him looking more towards us. There we are. So that's a little bit more exaggerated on this side. It feels like it's going in much further. And then as we move the eyes, the pupils become more oval rather than round. And if you're studying more realistic, these eyes are going to be smaller, and the nose is going to cover part of the eye depending on how far out that person's nose goes. Now, I have kind of a small rounded nose, so the bridge of my nose goes in like this. Someone who may have a stronger bridge, it's going to come out more. I don't want to get rid of this completely. So that's our center line. That goes around the center of the face. And if we have a sphere as part of the skull, it's going to hit about there, and then the jaw comes down. So there we have a more realistic render of what the other eye would look like, taking into consideration both the function and the style. And then with the nose, something very similar happens. You'll notice this eye is further this way than this eye because we are compressing. We're looking at a three-quarters view. So when we look at the nose, this nostril, we're going to see more of it, and we're going to see it further this way, whereas the other nostril, we're just going to barely see that, depending on how much detail you want to put in an anime nose. There. And then with the mouth, yeah, your chin, so you made your chin pointed, which is very common in anime. I would flatten out the chin a little bit to get a little closer to realistic. That was my cat. Be weird if my dog was meowing. So then we have the mouth, and anime moves the mouth to be smaller than it is. Usually the pupil, if you're looking straight ahead, is going to drop down, and that is the edge of your mouth if you're smiling. So if he's giving a smile, I'm going to bring it out to at least there. And we're still going to have that compression. So the center of my lip is here. We're not going to have as much on this side as we are on this side. And when you're doing studies from realism, note that the lips move outwards. So you kind of get almost a cutoff from the lips when you're looking at a more realistic style, but for the sake of anime, he probably just has a line. And if he's giving a smirk, it's going to come out to about there. I forget if anime does the top lip or a line for the bottom lip. Depends on how thick or thin you want their lips to be. So let's get back to this hairline. If we have a hairline and he has a part right here, the part goes back like that. And we have the hair that comes down and hangs. Oh, and you did include a sideburn. All right. And then it's going to come out this way. It's going to come out here. This is a principle that I have thought about, but I don't always implement. And that is, the hair isn't all one size of chunks. You are correct in drawing the hair as an overall shape rather than trying to break it down into individual itty-bitty strands. To create a more visually pleasing aesthetic, I forget who mentions this rule. I think it's Proko. But the use of small and large shapes and medium. Large, small, and medium shapes. So I might make this bigger so that I have one big shape for his hair. And then this is kind of big, but it's divided into smaller ones. These are kind of a medium size, where this one over here is kind of small. And that gives more interest to our hair. And I think he has an undercut. That's what it looks like. I will admit I'm not the best at drawing anime. Every time I try, it just looks kind of strange. There we have it. There's our 3/4 view. There is our hairline that goes back like this. Remember, we're looking at a 3-dimensional object, and when you part your hair on the side, it usually goes back to around the apex, where that's where, if we have a cowlick, that's where it's going to be, and our hair changes direction. So, again, I would be looking at realism and how people how people look with actual proportions on a real human face. If you don't know who to draw, you can always draw yourself. We also have continuing to study anime because there's so many different types of styles. If you look at the style challenge, where they specifically focus on anime and manga, you have Dragon Ball Z looks different than Sailor Moon, which looks different than Bleach, which looks different than One Piece. So there's a lot of different styles to take into consideration, and you're looking at someone who knows the rules and has decided to bend the rules in a specific manner. Okay, so let's move on to shading. Why do we shade? Shading provides value. Value defines form. So when we are looking at realism, we have 3 different kinds of edges. We have a hard edge, which is one color going to another color. And there's no blending between them. Hard edges occur when we have things like a cube, where it has clearly defined differences in plane. So for example, on the human face, we're going to have a hard edge inside where the shadow of our ear going inwards meets the little blub of cartilage that sticks out. That's going to be a hard edge. And in anime, usually we do cell shading, which is only hard edges. In real life, we have other types of edges. We have our hard edge, which is for things like cubes, and then we have soft shading, which is going to be for things like spheres, cylinders, where the change in plane isn't so clearly defined. And then in addition to that, we have lost edges, which happens when we are painting. If we have something that is in shadow, that is going towards a dark surface, sometimes that edge is lost. There's not a clear definition between one object and the next object because the values are either too bright or too dark. You'll see this, the cover of Phantom of the Opera, the movie when it came out, has some lost edges. They're standing in like a stage light fading into black, so the edge of some of their faces is lost. That is a completely blurred edge where 2 things should meet, but the values are so similar it's hard to tell. How do I do this in traditional art? Because this is a traditional piece and I'm working in digital right now. I would recommend getting some, this looks like maybe computer paper, I don't know. I would get a sketchbook, even if it's one from Walmart. It's going to have a little bit more tooth, it's going to stand up to erasing better, it's going to hold the pencil better. Then I would get a set of artist pencils. You'll notice that they are labeled with H or B, sometimes HB, sometimes F. HB and F hang out in between. And you'll also notice they have numbers. So H is hard. The higher the number, the harder the lead, the softer the mark. With B, the higher the number, the softer the lead, the darker the mark. So I recommend finding a set of General's pencils. They're pretty easy to find. You can get some at Walmart or Target. You can also find them online, like at blick.com, Michael's, Joann's. They will all have sets of artist pencils. I would make sure that there are a few H's and a few B's. That's going to give you the full range. Sketch with H's, and if you want to lay down a flat value, that will also help. You can't press too hard because then it'll be fairly light, and then use B's for shading. So let's talk about shading in the face. I'm going to go with a little bit lighter gray. So like I said with anime, you're going to have cell shading, which is only hard edges. You were right, there is a shadow on the neck from where the head meets the neck. There's a line for the jawline, unless you have a softer, rounder face. There's going to be a shadow under the nose. Because the nose sticks out, it's going to cast a shadow, and the bottom of the nose is a different plane, which is going to also have a shadow. The upper lip is in shadow. You can do a little bit for the lower lip if you want to add that detail. And then the eye socket is going to have a bit of shadow. And then where the eyelid is, that shadow breaks a little bit. And then, of course, the hair is going to cast a shadow onto the face. Now with hair, at least in anime, they use 3 different tones. One is the base, so I'm going to use this. Along with pencils, you may also consider picking up a set of blending stumps or tortillons. That way you can blend out the pencil without using your finger. Our fingers have oil in them that smudges the pencil, but it also makes it harder to put pencil on top of it because the oil has now changed. Okay, so we have, this is our hair color. We're going to go down a bit and make that our shadow color. And we're going to go up a little bit, and that's going to be our highlight. It doesn't show up here, but that's fine. It'll show up on the hair. If you start going with larger paper, and I mean larger than what you would get printing wise, copier paper, which is 8.5 by 11, then I would start considering using an easel so that your sketchbook sits up and you don't get, when you set it up, you don't get that feeling of being elongated. How do I know where to put shadow? So first, I have done various studies between looking at things like webcomics and looking also at realism. And that's how I know how shadows happen in the real world. I'm also considering where my light source is. If I have a light that's coming from this direction, then everything on this side is going to have a shadow. And anything that sticks out on the face or recedes is also going to have a shadow. If I wanted to, I could also put a shadow here. Give his face a little bit more definition, show where those plane changes are. I recommend looking up the Asario head, and that's going to tell you where planes of the face are. That really upped my game for when I draw portraits and when I do shading. I know that the front of the cheek has a plane. I know that here is a plane of the face. we're thinking in very blocky terms. Because like a sphere, the face has a very gradual shading, but the Asario head makes it very cube-like in that we can see where those changes occur in the face. And then we're going to take our highlight. And then I use kind of this thin sort of W shape to add in those highlights. Of course, with pencil, you may want to outline where you would put those highlights very lightly. I would use like an H6 pencil very lightly where you want to leave the highlights, so you know to come in here with an H2 and shade in the hair. And then in addition to that, go in with HB or a B2 and shade in the shadows of the hair. So, hope that helps on that one. You had a second piece, so let's go look at that. So here we have from the side view. I would be careful of the crop. You got very close to the edge, and I think you were a little scared of going too far. So we'll move back to that pen. We'll go back with that nice blue. So again, this comes down to how things function. Number one, so we have slope of the forehead, goes in for the nose. We're doing good so far. We come out for the nose. We have the nose. The nose doesn't have that much of a slope. I'm going to go a little darker. The nose does not have that much of a slope. With anime, yes, it's more of a pointed nose. They have simplified how rounded the nose is. And then how I learned to draw profile was actually from anime. The jaw comes out to here. And then we have the out for the lip, out for the bottom lip. The chin goes in and then comes out again and then goes back. So we'll go here. And don't think you have to have fancy digital painting stuff to be able to also do this. Yes, it makes life easier. I don't have to redraw hands if I make them too big or too small. That's great. The jaw's a little flatter. The ear goes back a little bit more. And then I can tell you're starting to get an understanding of the ear. But you're not quite there. You don't know all the ins and outs of the ear. Then the eye. The eye comes further back. This should be the front of the eye. And since it is a sphere, the eyelash comes up like this and out like this. Because see, here is the rest of the sphere of the eye. And it goes into the brow bone and the cheekbone. All of this is just cartilage. So there is our eye from the side. And things get a little bit squished. You no longer have that perfectly round pupil and iris. They're elongated. And then the eyebrow follows the curve of the brow bone. It's a very subtle change. Men have Adam's apples. Unless this is a boy, in which case less so. And then remember, when we turn sideways, we have a tendency to kind of compress the chest. Because we know it looks thinner, but we don't know how to convey the foreshortening. So, we're also going to give him a shirt. Again, with the hair, I would think a little bit bigger shapes. So, here's where his cowlick is. It's a little bit more flowy. Usually when a guy has longer hair, he doesn't have it cut to where the sideburn is just a straight cut. So that's how I would reframe the hair. Now, if you want to go with especially 90s anime where they add a lot of detail and there's a lot of individual strands, then I would think about big to medium to small and how many of each you use so it looks intentional where you place the hair strands. You did have some shading on the neck, so just like before, I would say that shading should be come all the way up to the jawline, because unless there's something right underneath him, uh, we're not going to have that reflective light where the bottom of the jaw is highlighted the way you had it. So that's how I would draw him. I think it's great that he has freckles. I think that's cute. So yeah, that's how I would draw a profile view. So to recap on what we have talked about, I would do both studies from realism and master studies. And when I say master studies, sometimes we think about how we're going to study a Rembrandt painting or a John Singer Sargent painting, which I also highly recommend. But a master can also be someone who creates an anime on a regular basis or a manga. And by studying what they do, we're going to learn creative problem solving. We're going to learn how they approach the world, and that gives us tools to put in our toolbox. The next thing I would do is invest in some art pencils and a good quality sketchbook. I recommend a round paper size. If you're going to go bigger, then you will need an easel because you're going to get the issue of elongating things. And when we start getting larger than about a printer paper size, rather than holding your pencil as you would to write, you're going to have a different grip and you're going to use the arm in order to make marks. There are some great videos on this on YouTube. I highly recommend Proco, which talks a lot about art education, tutorials, how to view things, lots of great stuff there. I believe he has a video on holding a pencil and drawing on larger paper. Generally getting like a sketchbook and art pencils, going to your local big store and finding them will work fine. No need to get anything expensive. Keep drawing, keep practicing. Art is a skill obtained through both knowledge and practice, so keep going, keep at it. I see you're looking at your work critically, you're looking at tutorials, or you're looking at things. There's just more to learn. Secret, there's always more to learn. So those are my recommendations for you today. Well, that's the end of the video. That's all I got. Well, at least for this video. You can check out more videos here. Subscribe to my channel there. Don't forget to hit all the buttons. And I'll see you next time.